I'm Max Brantley with the Arkansas Times. It's Monday, January the 18th. This is a national holiday in honor of Martin Luther King Jr., the late civil rights leader, and Arkansas has its own ceremony. It only commemorates Martin Luther King, although the state holiday officially is still also a commemoration for Robert E. Lee, the Civil War general who fought to preserve slavery in the South, which is something of an irony. We're one of 2 or 3 states that still has Lee on a par with King. Governor Asa Hutchinson said he plans to do something about that someday. He didn't in 2015 when he and the Republicans were in charge of the legislature. Perhaps they'll have better luck the next time it's brought up again. It's interesting, though, the Republican politicians were front and center at a prayer breakfast this morning at UALR and said nice things about Martin Luther King. What none of them did say is that they favored a restoration of the Voting Rights Act, the very thing that Martin Luther King worked hardest for 50 years ago, and which has been set back by both law changes and court decisions. Democrats in Congress want to change it. So far, none of the Republican members of Congress from Arkansas seem inclined to do anything about it, though they have issued social media statements today about Martin Luther King. Arkansas Business Today reports that the state lottery under the Hutchinson administration has extended a 10-year contract extension with Scientific Games, which provides scratch-off tickets for the state lottery. It did this without bids. It also did this for a company which was paid $7.5 million more than it was supposed to be paid under its original contract, under a contract alteration that was ordered by the lottery director. An awful lot of questions have dogged the lottery since its beginning. It's a $1 billion operation. There's a lot of money to be made for people. A future question is how changes in lottery requirements are going to affect poor children and minority children and receiving the scholarship funds that come from lottery winnings. Super PACs, the big new corporate infused money-making machines that are paying for presidential campaigns now, have found a little loophole in federal law, by which, if they report their money monthly, they will not have to file a report on income for the first of this year until February. What that means is that money that flows in for the important Iowa and New Hampshire primary and caucuses will be unreported. We won't know who get the money for those that choose to do this kind of filing. Most of the big candidates have chose to do this. So is Mike Huckabee's Super PAC, which so far has primarily been funded by a North Little Rock poultry magnate, Ron Cameron. Iranian prisoners were released over the weekend after long and hard negotiations between diplomats for U.S. and Iran. You'd almost think Senator Tom Cotton was sorry about it. He says this is another bad thing for Barack Obama, not a good thing. I don't know how else he would have achieved it except by force of arms. He seems to want to fight with Iran, not talk with Iran. Restaurant news today on a slow day. Probably worth noting that Donnie Furneaux, the famous chef and restaurateur around town, is going to close his North Little Rock restaurant and become the executive chef of a restaurant planned for Club 1836, which is going to be a new private club for business people in the historic Packet House on Cantrell Road. And Bruno's Little Italy is a few months behind, but work began today on its plan to add a luncheon deli next door to its restaurant on Main Street in the reviving downtown Little Rock, so you can get an Italian sandwich to go. That's about all we've got today. I think news will resume tomorrow. I'm Max Brantley.